He did such a good job. He was such a principled guy. He knew, based on that background, he was so good that after a year and a half here, John Lindsay, the mayor of New York, called me and says, I got to have a new commissioner. Do you mind if I talk to Pat Murphy? I said, you know. So Pat, they talked to Pat, and now he went back home. But you have to understand, let me just finish. When he came over here and became police chief, he said, all command officers have to have a degree. If you want a command position, maybe the top 8 or 10, or I don't know where you drew the line. But if you really want a promotion, you got to get a degree in law enforcement or societal problems of some sort. And he inspired the men to do that, and he upgraded the police department, and always dealing with the community relations with the black community. And so he came, and that was a promise kept with some skilled people in dealing with law enforcement and the community, and the black community particularly. My first appointment was as deputy mayor. There was no deputy mayor position, but I created it because I said so, and I appointed Walter Green, the black man, and Walter had been head of the Civil Rights Commission for the state of Michigan, and he had lived in Detroit, and I said, I need someone like you, would you like the job? And he said, I'll do it. So he came and moved to Detroit and took the job as deputy mayor. And he did a magnificent job. He was very articulate and very wise counsel on intense matters, and many times there was some societal problems in the community, and I would go there, and if he needed but the two of us would go, and then he'd speak to the black community. They would look at him a little more. Right. He was there. I said, when I'm out of town, you're running the city, and that's what his job was.
What was the percentage of African Americans in the police force when you came in as mayor? Was that a sore point?
They had about 11%. And I hired a recruitment man from the professional field to come and recruit, and everybody, and I insisted that whenever we had a class of, say, 100 new policemen for that 2-month period or whatever, half of them have to be black. And I said they have to be competent black, not just people that want to do the job. So they had to dig and sell, and I remember billboards. Being a cop is a good gig, or some such thing that attracted people of responsibility in the black community. So we had at least 50% of every policeman that was on the force were black. And when I left office, we'd gone from about 11% to about 21% over a 4-year period as the turnover. But in addition, we needed more policemen. So I worked hard for revenue sharing with other mayors throughout the country, with Lindsay, Alioto, and Moon Landreau, and those others, and we prevailed. And Nixon was then the president, and he was opting for revenue sharing, which would give us more money for 3 fields. One of the fields was police. So we supported him nationally, and we finally got some revenue sharing, which is not the block grant program, but it's actual cash. I remember the first check that I picked up about 2.5 years into my office was for $56 million for a year and a half. That's what
you could use for anything you wanted.
Well, we would designate it. So we did it for the police. When I left office, we had 6,000 policemen, and instead of 4,500. And so we were always growing. And we brought crime down. For the first time in about 10, 12 years, we had not only a reduction in the increase, but an absolute reduction in crime. In my 3rd year in office, the crime went down in Detroit by 16%. Visibility of the police, training of the police, respect to the community that would cooperate with the police. And that was all building toward a better city and a safer city.
Now, what about fiscal issues or problems? Did you have any while you were mayor?
I'll tell you, we did. When I took office, the city of Detroit, Jerry Cavanaugh had been mayor, and of course he went through the riots, and personally he was a good guy. He really was disappointed with that happening because he had great rapport with the black community. But that's another story of '67. Anyway, they had fiscal problems. People were running away from the city of Detroit if they could afford to. So he gave me a $40 million deficit. So the first year I'm in office, we got a deficit of $40 million, and at that time that was very substantial. So within 3 months I'm studying layoffs. Within 4 months we give a notice of layoffs. Within 5 or 6 months we're laying off, and I remember the headlines: layoffs by the city of Detroit, first time since the Depression. So it really was a staggering responsibility, but it had to be done. And we did it effectively, and I had some good fiscal people, and Bob Rosell comes to mind. He was my fiscal officer. And he went on to become an executive vice president of Campbell Evo for 20 years. Highly talented guy. Anyway, we were able to balance the budget. I was able to bring in revenue sharing to plug the holes, and we balanced the budget the second year, third year, and the fourth year. When I left office, we left office in January, halfway through the fiscal year. I left Coleman Young with a surplus of about $12 million.
Wow.
And so by that time, economy had turned up, so we had some better revenue and things were picking up.
Before we go any farther, let's just go back briefly to 1967, the Detroit riot. Why did that happen? And what were the ramifications for Jerry Cavanaugh? It must have been devastating to him. He'd been a very popular mayor. The riot almost seemed to destroy his political career. He never really recovered from that. Is that the way you view it?
Jerry Cavanaugh and I graduated at the same time from the University of Detroit, but he went to night school, so he finished in January going to night school, but we were both in the same picture of graduates of '54. And he was an excellent mayor, and he had, well, they say that when he defeated the incumbent Mariani, it was because the black community liked him, and they supported him. And he had a lot of black organizations, so he was their choice, and he was their favorite. And because he was an enlightened guy and articulate, and he dealt with national organizations very well. He ran for a second term. He had no problem being reelected. He was going to go for a third term, but he changed his mind, and that opened it up.
Before that and before the riot in '66, though, he decided, I want to be a U.S. Senator.
Oh, that's right.
And he challenged G. Menon Williams in a Democratic primary.
That's right.
And he lost to G. Menon Williams. Did that hurt him in a way, do you think?
Sure.
Maybe
Sure.
not just personally, but in Detroit, where they thought, well, you know, this guy's ready to bail out on us. He's just a grasping, you know, politician who wants to climb the next step on the ladder, and then the next year they have the riot.
Well, the riots had nothing to do with his election.
Ambitions.
No.
Okay.
It was the turmoil. It was the temper of the time. There were riots going on in all the major cities,
like
Los Angeles,
Watts,
Los
Newark.
Angeles, and even New York had some.
Right.
They weren't citywide, but
was
they had
it the
some.
Vietnam War, do you think?
Pardon me?
Was it the Vietnam War?
That was part of the matter, yeah. When I was elected, they tried to bring in, you know, what do you think about that? I said, wait a minute, I'm not going to talk about that.
You're not going to talk about it. Was that a factor, though, looming in the background all the time that you were mayor, the Vietnam War?
Oh, yes, yeah. It was very unpopular in terms of the masses of the people. But I was always able to say, that's a matter for Congress and the president and the senators. Let's talk about the home problems we have here. Let's solve those in the neighborhood. And so I avoided
You couldn't see necessarily a negative impact of the Vietnam War on the running of the city? I mean,
no, and I don't think so. They just brought turmoil, you know, and dissension and a great deal of agitation by those that chose to agitate.
Right.
But going back to Jerry Cavanaugh, he was a good guy, and those riots surprised everybody, and surprised him. And it turned out that Detroit suffered one of the major riots over the mid-'60s that were across the United States, and it had been. He had been such a good administrator, and because he had dealt so well with the black community, which were, you know, about 45% of the city were black at that time.